to Scholarly Research in Social Work. I'm Jill Boren, and I'm the liaison to the Social Work Department. Today, I will be going over how to do research using the scholarly databases for social work. And I will be following the guide that accompanies this video that has a bunch of steps that we will go over and exercises. So this is the library's homepage where all searches begin and where I say that we launch all searches. The thing that draws your eye when you directly look at the library's homepage is this discovery box right here. This is a great way to search for articles and books and other materials from the library all at once, except I find it very overwhelming. And for social work researchers specifically, I encourage you to skip that initially and go to a more specific social work database. So we do that by clicking on Databases Listed by Title, S, and then Social Index with Full Text. Social Index with Full Text is actually a sociology database, but it has all of the most important social work journals within it. In fact, you will find from our searches that they result in lots of articles from specific social work journals. So we're going to begin with exercise 1 from my guide. So we're at Social Index with Full Text, and we're going to search for 2 terms. So foster care and adolescence. And I like this because it tells you when you to spell the word correctly. So one of the things you always want to make sure that you limit to in this database is scholarly peer-reviewed journals. That ensures that your results come from only the most scholarly journals, not newspapers or popular magazines. So we click on search, and we come up with 692 results. Now, sometimes when you come up with a result with that many hits, it means that you have too many results, your terms are too broad, or you're not specific enough, or in this case, we're not using the terminology that the database likes. So how do we find the terminology the database likes? There are several ways. One way to do that is by clicking on subject terms. That's the thesaurus in this database. So when you click on Browsing Sociology Thesaurus, you search for the term foster care. So I search for foster care, and it comes out with the term foster care, use foster home care. And I click on the blue, and I click on the blue again. That means it's a subject term in this database, and it has a scope note and related narrow and broader terms. So what this is telling me is that foster home care is the term for foster care in this database. Obviously, they mean exactly the same thing, but if you use the term the database likes, you get more recent and relevant results. So now if I put in the word adolescence, it's going to tell me use adolescents, use teenagers. Again, it means the same exact thing. They just want these people this age to be referred to as teenagers in this database. Later, I'm going to be talking about how you determine what the terms are for age groups, life stages, but now we know that the term is teenagers in this database. So we go back to the advanced search, and now armed with the correct terms, we put in foster home care, foster home care, and teenagers. Again, limiting to scholarly peer-reviewed, and then click on search. Now we get 161 results. And many social work professors require students to have results only from the last 10 years. So it's easy to do that limit right here. You move this toggle switch to 2007 to 2017. So there's 105 articles with these terms in this database from the last 10 years. And And we can verify that the terms are correct, that the terms are the ones the database likes, by clicking on a result. So if I click on number 4, evidence-based practice for youth and supervised out-of-home care, I see teenagers is definitely a blue term, so that's a subject term, and so is foster home care. But upon looking at these other subject terms, I find other things that I can use for future searches. In fact, using search terms, subject terms as keyword terms in future searches represents the best way to narrow or broaden your search. Terms like evidence-based social work, social policy, intervention, or even social work administration might get you really great results. So I always recommend that you have a notebook next to you and you jot down terms that you think are useful for future use, and then you try permutations and combinations with those and see what you get. For example, when I searched foster home care and evidence-based social work, because I really like that term, I got 18 relevant articles in this database alone. But I want to still draw your attention to the other features in this full database record that are going to be so useful for you when doing social work research or research in any case. So first of all, you see the hyperlink names of the authors. Authors often write articles about the same or similar topics. So by clicking on a name of one of the authors, you can get the other articles that she has written that are in this database. In this case, this author has written 11 articles in this database, and they all seem to be about foster care in some way. So that is really effective. So if you click on the back button, there are other features that you can use. One of my favorites is the cited references. So these are the 96 references that these authors use to inform their own scholarship. When I click on that link, I get the list here, and sometimes you get lucky and it's available full text directly from this list, like number 7. So that's another thing that you can do. You can also get the information to look it up later if you want the other references that these authors have used. So I click on the back button. Another useful thing is time cited in this database. For this article, the number is not very high. When the higher the number, the more important the article is, because it means that lots of articles have cited it. So clicking on cited references gets you going backwards in scholarship, because these articles will have been written prior to 2009 for them to be used. But time cited in this database gets you newer articles published after 2009 that have referenced that article. So you see this is from 2014, and this is from 2012. These may or may not be useful or relevant, but it's a really good way to get newer scholarship. And finally, another thing that you can try with a resource within this record is clicking on the name of the journal. Now, before I did the search, I didn't know there was a journal of evidence-based social work. But now that I do know that, I want to find out what other articles it has on my topic. So I can click on the name of that journal, click on search within this publication, and then search for foster home care. So I put in foster home care, search, and I have 10 articles in this journal alone on my topic. So that's a really great way to do it. Now, if you're looking at my handout, you see that other terms like policy, legislation, social services, public welfare, and social workers ensures that you get articles from social work journals and relevant articles. But other terms are useful in articles as well, as search terms as well. And sometimes when you look at the articles themselves, you see that social workers or social work scholars write articles about specific ethnic or racial groups and specific populations in reference to whatever their topic is. So using names or terms referring to the race, ethnicity, class, or sexual orientation of the population you are studying very much helps you narrow down to a manageable topic, and is following the kind of scholarship that social workers could do. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And any article that you find, that you stumble upon, definitely make sure that you look at those other resources that I showed, because for any article, some of them have less than others, but for any article, these are very useful resources. And I always sort of say that, you know, doing that is like this one, using these resources, the author's names, the subject terms, the cited references, is like each article record acts as a mini database itself. So that's really useful. Now, SocialIndex is not the only database at our institution that is useful for social work research. There's another database that I also like. It's called Psycinfo. It really depends upon what your topic is as to which database you try. I always recommend trying both of them because you never know what differences you're going to see. So if we click on the library's home button, and get to the library's home page, and now we click on databases listed by title and P, and then Psycinfo. This is another database. And you notice, the first thing that you should notice is it looks very, very much like SocialIndex, almost identical. But when you start looking at it more specifically and more in depth, you will see the differences. So I always recommend that you check the upper left-hand corner of your database to ensure that you're in the one you intend to be in. Because they look so similar, it is easy to get confused and do all your research and not get the results that you anticipate. So it makes sense that you're not stumbling upon the wrong database. So double check that you're in the right one. So the thing about Psycinfo, one thing that to know off the bat is it has different subject terms. And so it's useful to look in the thesaurus for this database and just see that the terms are different. So if I put in foster home care, for example, that was the term that SocialIndex told me to use, and it says use foster care. So that's just one difference. So we're going to find differences in that, and that might really change how you do your searches, especially when the terms are very different. So don't feel that if you have one good set of terms for SocialIndex, it's going to work very well in the other database. It might, but it might not, because of these different thesauri. So it's good to double check that, and you can double check it in the record as well. So this is exercise number 3 on my guide, and the terms I'm using are rape and aged and major depression. Now you might be wondering why I'm using these very specific, maybe odd terms. It's because these are the terms that this database likes. I have looked into the thesaurus and discovered that. So I click on those 3 terms, and yes, I want to limit to peer-reviewed here, and then I click on search. So I get 49 results. But there are different ways to think about using terms related to life stages, age groups. I told you that I was going to explain that in more depth. So Psycinfo has an age group field. So instead of just putting aged there, I can change this to an age group field, which is AG, age group. And I click on search, and I go from 49 to 25. And to show how this age group field works, you'll see it's not perfect, but it gets us closer. So you see article number 1 talks about these problems with rape survivors across the whole age spectrum. And number 2 refers to functioning of older adults. But even though it mentions just older adults, it includes in the age group field adults, middle-aged, aged, and very old. So it only gets you closer. So then the question becomes, what is this age group field, and how do I find that out? So if we go to the library's homepage again, and I click on databases research by subject area, I'm taking you to my subject guide, which is social work. And this is a really good guide to get lots of information about social work. But it also has, one of the things it has is preferred terms for life stages, age groups. So this is the guide that I created that includes what terms are useful in which databases to refer to which age groups. So you see in Social Index, I use the word teenagers to refer to people in the 13 to 18 age group. But in Psycinfo has these terms, but I can also use the age group field, and that's when these terms come into play. And aged is the term for people who are 65 and older, and adolescents with a CE is the term for people who are 13 to 17. So you might want to just print this out for your own reference when you're dealing with age groups, life stages, because it can get you closer to the population that you want. So I'm going back to Psycinfo, and what I want to show you from this article is that it has the the same resources that were useful in Social Index are here as well. They're just formatted a little bit differently. So you can all click on the names of the authors and find what other articles they have written that are in this database. You can get subjects, they're called subjects in this database, and see what other terms you can use for future searches, like trauma and physical disorders might be useful given a topic about rape and its effects. And then this one has cited references 111, so you can click on that and see, are there any full text options? And yes, there are. Number 6, number 7 have full text right directly from that list. So you see how that's useful in both databases. That's one of the links that I really like to use. So we're going to go back to the result list to see the full list. And often the full text is available from many of the articles directly from this screen. So you can get it one-stop shop. You just click on it and you get the full text. But sometimes it's not available that way. So you see most of these articles do have the full text there, but number 3 does not. When I click on the title and I get to the full record, I still don't see the full text. But I see this link that says Full Text Finder. Full Text Finder is a way in that you can find the full text from another online resource at Widener. All you have to do is click on Full Text Finder, and it gives you the name of another resource. You click on that resource. You don't have to know what these are or how these work. Just click on the resource and see. Most of the time, it will get you to the full text. And indeed, this one did. It took me to Science Direct, which is another database here at Widener, and in fact, it gets me to the full text of this article directly. Now you see I have 2 ways of viewing this article in Science Direct. As an HTML document, which is like a website, or I can download the PDF. You always want to download the PDF whenever you have the option. A PDF is a far superior way to view an article, especially when you're doing it for research, because it has the correct page numbers, so your bibliographic records will be correct. And the graphs, charts, or pictures like this that are in the article are going to be present in the PDF and in context. Sometimes on a website, they are not in the correct context or they are absent. So you always choose the PDF when you have that option. And what I also like about Science Direct is it gives you other articles that are relevant that you might find useful. So it's another database to try. So I'm going back to my original search. And so Full Text Finder is a very useful thing to use to get the full text of articles that are not full text directly through the database. Now there's other ways to get the full text that I'm going to explain at the end. But that's just one thing to do. Actually, I'll explain that now. So sometimes you get in an article that doesn't have a full text finder link. See, all of these do. So Full Text Finder is very useful. So let's see if I can find one that doesn't have a Full Text Finder link. I can. We'll do it definitely at the end. So let's just try to take one of the words out. And so number 9 does not have the Full Text Finder link. And this is an article that, say, I want from 2013. I don't have that link, so my next option is to order this through Interlibrary Loan, or Illiad. So I click on the Illiad Wolfgram link, and it takes me to the Illiad sign-in screen. I click on first-time users. I scroll to the bottom, click on first-time users, click here. You need to fill this out with your name, all your information, a username and password that you're going to remember for Illiad, and then an email address that you check on a regular basis. Once you do that, and you enter all your information, you want to do the orders for Illiad directly through the database, because if you click on Illiad Wolfgram, again, and you put in the username and password that you created, putting in mine, all of the information for that article is filled out for you. So you don't have to worry about what is the volume number, issue number, or ISSN number that you may not know. All the information is filled out for you. You just press submit request, and then you will get an email from Interlibrary Loan Office saying that your article has arrived. So you log into Illiad and you click on view electronically retrieved articles right there, and then you can download or print and save the article that you just ordered. Just want to caution you that Illiad is not a storage medium. It only stays there for 30 days and then it goes poof. So you want to make sure you download it and save it, because you want to have that document that you ordered. It doesn't usually take that long for it to come. I've had an article come in the same day or the next day when I ordered it, or maybe a few days later, but it's a very, very efficient service, and it's usually free to you. So I definitely recommend you employing it, because it's a way that you can get any article that you want that this library doesn't own. So that's search. So then there's one more database that I want to go over for searching. And so I'm going to go to the library's homepage again, and I'm going to click on databases just by title, and then I'm clicking on JSTOR. JSTOR is known as an archival database. Different from the databases that we just went over, it's a database that gets you older articles, not necessarily articles that were printed this year or last year, but articles that were published way back. It's a way to get at earlier literature. And this is useful if you have a social work class where you have to find the beginnings or the foundation of a social problem. So, for example, if my search, I'm looking for social welfare and poverty, and incidentally, I put the words in quotation marks because this database does not recognize words next to one another as a phrase, so you have to put it in quotation marks to tell the database this is a phrase. I don't want only the word social or only word welfare in the article. I want them both next to one another. And you always want to limit it to articles because there's lots of reviews, and you want to eliminate those reviews from your results. So I click on search. And one of the benefits to JSTOR, you see it's not things that are necessarily the most recent, but I can change the relevance. So I can change relevance from, I'm going to sort from relevance to oldest. And so it gets me the oldest articles first. And what I want to show you is this article, Notes on Statistical Determination of the Causes of Poverty. I really like this article because it shows you the value of what you can find at JSTOR. So this is an article from the American Statistical Association published in 1889 talking about the causes of poverty. And so this is being written in 1889. This is going to talk about the perspective of people from that time and how they viewed poverty, and they view people who were poor and what were the causes. So it's going to talk about things like low moral character and other things that we have found out in today's society are not valid. But it's a way to get at the language and the ways that people thought about these things in those days. And clearly that affects how policies were designed, even how policies were created that are still in use today. They were created, maybe the foundation of them was at this time when people were thinking about things very differently than we think about these things today, but it still impacted how policies were created. So it's a good way to get at the foundation of things. So that's JSTOR. And you can play around with it. I think you'll find really neat stuff there. And JSTOR also offers the opportunity for some articles, not the early ones, to get the list of references like we did in the cited references. So if I change it from oldest back to relevance, and I just click on a random article, Measuring Welfare, Poverty, and Inequality from 1987, you see I can get a list of references. So some of them I may be able to link on, but I do get a list of references, and you can use these to find other articles that might be relevant to your topic. So that's the 3 databases that I wanted to show you. And the best way to learn database searching is practice, practice, practice. So I recommend that you practice these exercises that I provided and use your own terms and see how you go. Make mistakes, correct your mistakes, try different terms. That's the best way to discover how these databases work effectively. And remember, terminology is the most trying thing when you're doing social work research. So please contact me when you have questions about terminology, because together we can figure out how to come up with the best terms that are going to get you the best results. So now I want to go to Google, because the next part is to find information about social problems on the internet and leading toward policy and legislation. So one of the things in Google is we can search for the advanced search screen in Google. And you just have to actually search for advanced search, which is weird. So I put advanced search, Google advanced search. Now what advanced search lets us do is I'm putting in a term. So I'm putting in mental health. And then I can limit to a site or domain. So I'm limiting to the government, GOV, government documents. So now only my results will come from government documents, not organizations and not commercial sites. And so here we go. So it says mentalhealthsite.gov. So what I want to choose is the National Institute of Mental Health. So this is the National Institute of Mental Health is an agency. Their parent company is the National Institutes of Health. And this is a great place for information about mental illness and mental illnesses and mental health programs. And it's also useful to find other resources and other agencies and organizations that deal with these issues. So when you click on Outreach and then Outreach Partnership Program and then National Partners, I like this because this gives a really great list of its actual organizations. Some of them are governmental, some of them are organizations that deal with all different types of mental illnesses and specific mental illnesses. So if you want to look at something about autism, you can click on this site. Anxiety and Depression Association would be here. So it's a really good way to get at very specific agencies and organizations that deal with specific mental illnesses and waste. And hopefully all of these sites will talk about policy and legislation. So, but to get information about policy and legislation in general, or mental illness in general, you can search for mental health programs on this website and get a bunch of stuff on NIMH about mental health programs. You can also, because it is a subsidiary of the National Institutes of Health, you can click on National Institutes of Health I put in mental health programs, and I actually get many of the things I get are the National Institute of Mental Health, which I was just at, but it shows you how these things are very well connected. So that's one way to find social problems on the internet. I like limiting to government sites, at least at the beginning, because you can then, as you see how I did, branch out from there, but it's a good place to start. And incidentally, the social work subject guide that I showed you has a list of very useful government policy and social policy websites that you might be able to find useful information from. So Another thing that you are often asked to do is to find legislation when you have an actual piece of legislation. So if I go to congress.gov, if I know of somebody gave me a citation for an actual piece of legislation, I can find that legislation from the language of the Congress and find everything there is about that. So congress.gov is the legislative branch of the Library of Congress's website. So if I click on all legislation, because current legislation just searches the current Congress, so you want a wider search. And I'm going to put in preventing sex trafficking, and let's see if that gets it. Come on. It didn't work. Sex trafficking, okay. And so my bill is preventing sex trafficking and strengthening families. So let's see if that will work. Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act. It's right there. So to ensure that I get the final version of an act, which is what you always want because you have the most information from it, you want to click on Status of Legislation. When I click on Status of Legislation, I always want to click on Became Law. Now I have the final version, the version that became the law, and then I have the most information that I want. So Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act, 2013 and 14. So if I click on that, you get the full version of the bill. And I always like to choose the PDF because it's the full thing, the full 32 pages, and you get a lot of information as well as other statutes and other codes that you can use to find other related legislation. Because each piece of legislation in the U.S. Congress is based upon previous legislation, and it's referred to in the language of the bill, and that's very useful. So if I go back to my search screen on congress.gov, I can search for just topics as well. So I can go, if I don't have the actual name of the legislation and I just want to search for something broader like foster care, I can go back and click on all legislation again and put in, and I forgot that putting quotation marks really helps, so you should do that in this database too. So I put in foster care, and again, I'm going to limit, this time I'm going to limit to the last 2 Congresses. Fortunately, it doesn't let me do it both at the same time, and I'm going to limit to, again, status of legislation and became a law. So there's 10 pieces of legislation in the last, I guess, 4 years that have, or 3 years, that have mentioned foster care in some way, and they all became law. And I can click on any one of these and find more information about them. So that's a really useful thing that you can do in congress.gov. Now, sometimes you need to do other things to find older legislation because congress.gov only goes back to 73, but the full text goes back less than that. I think it's just the 90s that you can get the full text. So you can actually go to the home page of congress.gov, and another thing that it offers you to search is the U.S. code. This is a little cumbersome, but I found it useful. The U.S. code is the codification of all laws in the United States. And if I click on the Popular Names tool, and then I click on the PDF file, I can search for any piece of legislation and find out what the public law name of that number is, so then I can search for it. So the piece of legislation I want to look at is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So I can do Control F, And you see Civil Rights Act of 1964, the public law number is PL, is that. So I can copy that and then go to Google search, and here it is. Here's the public law, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, in the same text, using the same congressional language, and the full 28 pages, and you can get really great information from there. And that's one way to find some legislation using congress.gov. It is cumbersome, and again, please contact me when you have additional questions or you have specific pieces of legislation that you need to find and you're having difficulty, because I'll be happy to help you with that process. The last thing that I wanted to show you was, because I know some students have had this question as well, another piece of legislation that you often are asked to find is executive orders passed by the president. So if I go back to Google, and the place that I found, I actually searched for executive orders disposition tables, and what came up, when it came up with, was the National Archives has these disposition tables, and I thought it was interesting and useful that the last 4 presidents have a subject index. So if I click on a Barack Obama subject index, for example, I can look at H, and I can see that these are the executive orders that he passed that related to healthcare in some way. So that's really interesting that you can look at different topics and see what executive orders this president passed based on those topics. Unfortunately, only the last 4 presidents have those subject indexes available. So to get to previous presidents and find information about them and find their executive orders, or executive orders and in full text, you have to go to another website. So if we go back to Google, it's called the American Presidency Project. So you see it's right there, American Presidency Project. The American Presidency Project, and I can click on Documents, and then Public Papers of the Presidents, Executive Orders. And these executive orders, in fact, go back to 1826, and you can get the full text. And you can sort of select a president and see, select a year, and see what things you can get, what information you can get. So, so for example, if you look at 1942, these are executive orders passed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and you say establishing the War Labor Board, and here is the text. And that's really great to have that information at your fingertips. So I showed you interlibrary loan before, and so I want you to be aware. So we're going to go back to the library's homepage, and just remember, this is the place where you launch all of your searches, and you can find my subject guide and all of the databases. And you can try the discovery system if you want, but just be aware that it's going to get you very many results that might not be specific to social work. So I recommend using Social Index or Psycinfo initially. And the most important thing that I want you to know is my contact information. So if you click on Need Help and Ask a Librarian, and you can get here's my name, Jill Boren, and my phone number and my email address. I encourage you to contact me in any way that works for you. And we can even set up a Zoom session where we can talk to one another, and I can share my screen directly with you, and we can discuss any questions that you have about your research, or please give me a call. We can do that over the phone as well, but I'm here as a resource to help you in any way I can, and I encourage you to take me up on that. I love working with students, and I want to help you make your research as easy and accessible as possible. So please contact me when and if you have any questions. I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much.